Hello everyone, it is Joe here from OmniPoke, the channel that brings you guys everything Pokemon. Today we're going to be going over the most interesting cards from Unified Minds ASAP. Let's start off with the cards that are going to be influencing not only the new decks but also the old ones that we already have established. Starting off with Reset Stamp, it forces your opponent to shuffle their hand in, draw the number of cards they have equal to their prize cards. It's a great comeback mechanic, and it can really force your opponent out of a win condition, remove their custom catcher combos, remove their damage modifiers, remove their option of getting like their last attacker going. This will be a great way to even up a prize race, even if you do start falling behind. Cherish Ball is amazing. It not only lets you get out all of your GX main attackers, it can also help you get out things like Dedenne for your opening turn consistency to make sure you can get a fresh hand of 6 cards. So it's going to be a staple in a bunch of decks. That's like a 4 of if they are GX focused. Tag Switch again, it's an amazing card. It allows you to move up to 2 energy from one of your Pokemon tag team onto another of your Pokemon. It's going to be great, especially in things like Pikarom, where it has so much energy acceleration via Full Blitz. You can now move straight into a Tag Bolt GX attack if you want to, by putting stuff onto the bench and then knowing they can tag switch back into the active at any time. Or it could go straight into an Alolan Raichu's Lightning Ride GX attack for a big 250 damage attack, which is amazing. Tag Switch can also go into things like Welder decks, also things like Gardevoir Sylveon as well. So very versatile for tag teams, definitely a good card. Great Potion's one of our new healing options. It heals 50 from your active GX. This alongside Mixed Herbs and Super Scoop Up are the only things we have left now that Acerola's gone, so definitely something to bear in mind. Giant Bomb's a quirky little tool that says if you took 180 or more damage done to you that turn, you put 10 counters on the attacking Pokemon. It might be a deterrent from people taking big one-hit KOs against your stuff. Otherwise, they're going to take this 10 counters and put them in range of your next attacker, which could be a pretty interesting deal. Talking of Alolan Raichu and Raichu tag team, Tandem Shock's a pretty nice like 2-hit KO option. You do 80, but if you got into the active that turn, 80 more damage, and you also paralyze the opponent. So again, alongside things like Reset Stamp, you can buy yourself a turn whilst also 2-shotting things. And that Lightning Ride GX attack does 150 in switch, just like a Golisopod GX attack. But if you do have 2 more energies attached to you, you're able to do 250 instead. So alongside things like Electro Power, you'll definitely be knocking out tag teams, which is insane. Circuitry is essentially like a new baby Buzzwole. However, it's when your opponent has 3 prize cards remaining, and of course he's a lightning type, so you can bear that in mind when scaling with things like Electro Power if you really want to. Electros is essentially like the new version of Tapu Koko. He can be put into play immediately from your hand if you have 4 lightning energies in play, and then you move them all onto Electros, or as many as you like, and you can start using his attack that just does 130, and the defending Pokemon can't retreat. It's pretty nice if you want to have a non-GX option in something like a Pikarom-based deck when you have so much energy like flowing around the board, and you can just move into him if you need a non-GX attacking option. Now that Zapdos is far weaker, because you can't really find Zapdos quite as easily early on in the game, and that's really the best time Zapdos ever works. Stadium Nav allows you to flip 2 coins for each head, search your deck for a Stadium card, so it's like timeable but for stadiums. It's pretty nice for picking out some crucial Prism Stars, especially things like Thunder Mountain, and of course bear in mind that Pikarom has Volkner search ability, so you give yourself a bunch more outs to get around Power Plant, which is a big headache for Pikarom, especially because it has Zero Aura and it does rely on Dedenne quite heavily on those opening turns. So I imagine it will be a one-off in Pikarom, might end up squeaking into a few other decks here and there, but really that's the only real home I have for it right now. The Gyarados GX comes with a great ability that allows you to draw cards. You can discard an Ultra Beast from your hand and draw up to 3, so it's like a Salazzle, but instead of Fire Energy, it's Ultra Beast, which is amazing. Obviously, we have Ultra Space and we have Mysterious Treasure, so there's great searchability for this card alongside Cherish Ball as well, of course. So the idea is that you can get some extra circulation going. This might be good in Blacephalon GX to help out on like your crucial Beast Ring turn. You can have a bit of extra digging potential, especially because you already play such a thick Gyarados line anyway. You can move some of your excess pieces to the discard pile. Whilst thinning the deck, you're also digging deeper to try and hit Beast Rings. It comes with 2 handy attacks as well, Venom Shot for a Psychic and 3 colorless, which might be easier to achieve thanks to things like Triple Acceleration or even Beast Ring for this guy itself. And it can do a 170 snipe anywhere you'd like, which is amazing. You do have to discard, I believe it's 2 energy attached to him as well. But this might be mitigated by, again, Triple Acceleration discarding itself anyway, or just if you play something like a Porygon Z-based deck, you could get back Recycle Energies, and there might end up being like a Quad Gyarados-based deck, just because you have that great Recycle Energy use to just spam Venom Drops the entire game. Injection GX may only be niche, but it does force the opponent to put an extra card into their prizes from their discard pile. You actually get to choose, which is pretty annoying for them. You essentially give them back a dead draw into their prize cards and make them take 1 more, which could be nice for skewing math, or allowing you to have some extra like specific Ultra Beast attack turns, which could be pretty cool. Giratina, Garchomp tag team, as well as Espeon and Deoxys tag team are great additions to potential Malamar archetypes. Teenachomp may end up being his whole new frontman over Ultra Necrozma. He can do Calamitous Slash, his main attack, for 160, already enough to knock out Dedennes, but if your opponent has any damage counters on them already, you do 80 more damage. So 240, pretty good chunk, and hopefully with some prior damage either from Distortion Doors or from spell tags or even from things like Mew in your deck or the linear attack from the Garchomp himself, you can probably knock out tag teams with it, which is pretty cool. You also have the GGN GX attack, which discards one of your opponent's Pokemon, so if you can't take a big one-hit kill on a massive threat, you can still just use GGN. You don't take any prize cards, but you remove a big threat from play, which is a pretty big deal, especially with less Pokemon and energy recovery and stuff in our formats. It's pretty much only Brock, which is really bad. Espeon and Deoxys might solely be used for his cross-division GX attack. It puts 10 counters on your opponent's Pokemon in any way that you like. This could be nice in a pure Psychic-based Malamar, especially if you are focused more on spell tags now that there's no more Field Blower. This could be a finishing move rather than having to find double custom catcher. You could use the Espeon and Deoxys instead to sort of muddle with the counters on your opponent's backline and take knockouts that way. Heatran and Giant Furnace are great new additions to the Fire decks. Giant Furnace is a stadium that allows you to discard one from hand and get 2 fires immediately from your deck. So it's like a Viridian Forest +1 for exclusively fire. This is amazing for Welder specifically, also great for things like Ninetales for gusting opportunities with Nine Temptations, which is incredible, and just in general, just allowing you to thin your deck, remove dead cards from your hand, and overall it's just a phenomenal card for the Fire decks. It might also be a way for us to have like half split energy decks, and just so that other decks can take advantage of Salazzles, Ninetales, and Welder in general. Things like Whimsicott, things like Aerodactyl might be adding in things like Giant Furnace just because the power level of the card is so insane. It might lift up the opportunity for us to play multiple types of energy just because the fire stuff is so important. Heatran GX is pretty nice. He has Burning Road, so if he becomes your active new Pokemon, you can move a bunch of energies onto him. It could be nice if one of your tag teams or other Pokemon gets hit and you want to sort of move your energies onto something new. Explosive Heat Stamp could do 130. It's enough to knock out most non-GXs, which is nice. And Heat Boomer GX is 50 for each energy attached to him. So not ideal. Usually it's a little bit under the power level of things like Charizard and stuff, but it could be a way around the Latios GX, which I'll be talking about later, if you are a heavily tag team focused deck. So it might end up being a one-of in the list just for that purpose alone, and because you can Cherish Ball search him for the right moments. Next up, we talk about possibly the most interesting new tag team from the set, and that's Mew and Mewtwo. Its Perfection ability allows you to copy GXs from the discard pile or in play, like on your bench. So it's a very versatile attacker that has lots of different options. It also has its own GX attack for Psychic Colors. You do 200. And if this has at least 1 extra energy, you're able to heal all damage from all of your Pokemon. So naturally, this may end up in something like a Malamar-based deck, just because you can copy some of your other GXs that you can play low counts of, whilst also having the option to fully heal yourself if people are going to try and 2-hit KO into you. So definitely something to bear in mind. But he's so versatile that we may end up seeing him alongside Welder builds. We may end up seeing him alongside Mina. There's so many options for the Mew and Mewtwo. It's just a very versatile card in general. Some of these GXs from the new set you might want to copy is something like the Dragonite, because Sky Judgment does 270, enough to knock out, an opposing Mew Mewtwo or Reshizard, which is really amazing. Latios GX could also be one that you'd like to copy. It does 120 for a Psychic and 2 Colorless, and you prevent all damage done to yourself by tag teams that turn, so it's a really annoying attack for opposing, once again, tag team decks to get around them, whilst also doing, close to 2-hit KOs, which is pretty nice against them. Jirachi GX is probably an integral piece of the Mewtwo deck. It's usually a one-of, even though it has a low hit points. You have this Psychic Zone ability that says that Psychic weak Pokemon no longer have weakness. That works on both sides, so your Mewtwo won't be hitting into their Mewtwo for weakness anymore, but the upside is you don't get wrecked by things like a Giratina or anything like that, which is cool. It has Star Search, which allows you to search your deck for a Psychic energy. An energy and attach it to a Psychic Pokemon, which is pretty cool. And also the Star Shield GX. It's like a mini version of Dawnwing's Necrozma's GX attack. You just do 100 and prevent all damage and effects are done to you next turn. It's very rare that you'll power this guy up unless you're specifically a Malamar-based deck, but it could be an option if you're in panic mode, especially alongside things like Reset Stamp. I think it's a good time to mention Weak Guard Energy, seeing as though it's very similar to the Jirachi. It provides colorless, but it's essentially a weakness policy as its effect being a special. This could be pretty nice. Again, things like Beast Box, where your Naganadel has a colorless attack cost, it could be pretty cool. And just from specific tag teams that have awkward weaknesses, you might want to cover that up. Back to Weak Guard Energy, it might make some grass tag teams a bit more relevant. And again, it might be another option for the Mew and Mewtwo and stuff like that, which is pretty cool. Good time to mention Hapu, seeing as though Mew and Mewtwo likes to have lots of GXs in the discard pile. This is a great new synergistic supporter that can help you dump things in the discard pile. It's essentially a Sage's Training +1 for any of you who remember that card. You're able to look at the top 6, then choose 2 of them and put them into your hand and discard the rest. This can be great. Again, synergy with the Mew Mewtwo, where you want random Pokemon in your bin as quickly as possible. Things like Malamar want Psych Energies in the bin. All sorts of different reasons why Hapu could be really cool, whilst at the same time giving you a pretty deep dig into your deck to pick out some specific pieces. So definitely a strong supporter if you have a little bit of synergy in your deck for discard. Speaking of dark stuff, we have Night City, Weavile, Umbreon, Darkrai, and Mega Sableye T-Tar. This might be an archetype that likes to use that Hapu, because a lot of the time you're going to want to get Darks into your discard pile, charge them back up with things like Naganadel, and then use Weavile's Shadowy Connection ability, allowing you to move them across the board so that you can use some of these two new tag teams, which is really awesome. Weavile pretty much just used for its ability. It's essentially a new version of Aromatisse, but for only basic Dark Energy. But definitely something to note. Night City says that your basic Dark Pokemon have no retreat cost. So you can see there's a lot of flexibility here. You can move the energies, you can move your basics around, and you're going to try and weave in these two tag teams to be your main engine. Black Lance does 150 and 60 to a benched GX Pokemon. That 150 is nice for 2-hit KOing, active tag teams, and it also easily polishes off non-GXs. Whilst also doing 60 to the bench, which can set up easy knockouts for other tag teams. It can get them in range of things like Mega Sableye T-Tar, which is really nice. The 60 into 210 from Greedy Crush is a great deal for you. Also, it can be nice at just like trying to target down a Dedenne over a number of turns for like a free knockout, which could be pretty cool. The Dark Moon GX attack can also help buy you time. For a colorless, your opponent can't play any trainer cards from their hand during their next turn. Bear in mind it says trainer, not item, so it also means they can't play, stadiums or supporters, which is a pretty big deal. They do very little that turn against you, which is awesome. If you happen to have 5 extra Dark Energy attached, you also knock out the opponent's Pokemon. So if you're able to save this to the late game, get 6 energies on Darkrai Umbreon, you take a 1-hit KO no matter what, no matter what's active, how much hit points they have or whatever. And at the same time, the opponent can't respond with, even things like Reset Stab. Just denying them that option could be a pretty huge deal for you, which is great. Mega Sableye T-Tar, probably the big beat stick of the deck with that Greedy Crush. For 5 energies total, you do 210. If you knock out a GX, you're able to take an extra prize card. So really big reward if you're able to get 5 energies into play, because not only are you taking out a tag team a lot of the time, if you set it up with Black Lance, you're taking 4 prizes, and then you're like custom catches away on a DNA from just winning the game outright. And when Mega Sableye T-Tar has 280 hit points on his own side, he just sticks around for a long time. Also, he has another 1-hit KO option in Giga Full GX. 250 is enough just to simply knock out things like Pikarom, which is a pretty nice deal for you. If you happen to get 10 energies in play, there's huge meme potential because you can discard the top 15 cards of your opponent's deck, but that'll be extremely rare. Onto the fossil stuff. Pokemon Research Lab's a great stadium card that allows you to end your turn, but you're able to search your deck for 2 things that evolve from an unidentified fossil and put them straight into play. This most notably might be used alongside the Aerodactyl GX or the non-GX that we have from Team Up, seeing as though they're reasonable like stage 1 attackers, so they immediately come into play so that you can start attacking with them on turn 2. Aerodactyl has a very pesky ability, very similar to the Goomy, saying that while he's active, your opponent's basics need 1 colorless more to attack, hoping that slows people down alongside his fighting type coverage. Might be a good reason why he might see play at Worlds. Obviously, he's good at handling the Pikarom matchups, especially with its Wild Dive GX attack that does 50 for each energy on your opponent's active Pokemon. So you can see the synergy there, the ability and the attack working in tandem with one another, forcing the opponent to overcommit to certain attackers. Then you punish them instantly with a Wild Dive. Also, Boulder Crush is a nice 2-hit KO option. For fighting 2 colorless, you do 120. I mentioned earlier about Big Oven and stuff like that. I imagine Aerodactyl will probably have to incorporate the Welder engine if it's going to see play, because you need to have energy acceleration at some point throughout the game, so you can spam Boulder Crush as much as possible. Also, bear in mind, Diancie can push this number into slightly better shape with 140, so you can actually 2-hit KO things like Mew Mewtwo, which is pretty nice. Black Belt's a pretty cool tool card that can help out fighting types as well. If you have more prize cards remaining in your opponent, the attack cost of this Pokemon is 1 fighting less. So it can be helpful. It's essentially a counter gain, but for fighting type energy exclusively. So it can help make things like Marshchamp a lot more of a reasonable threat. And again, it can help out Aerodactyl. You can even tech an Aerodactyl into a certain deck. If you play Black Belt, you don't even need to play any fighting energy. You can just go for Wild Dives, which is quite hilarious to me. Another fossil coming out from the set is Caracosta. It just says that tools have no effect, so it might be an answer to things like Shedinja if you're very worried about that, and if you're already playing fossils. Onto some meme tag teams that we get from the set. Slowpoke and Psyduck is definitely more on the meme side. Ditch and Splash is 40, and you discard a number of supporters from your hand, and you do 40 for each you discard in this way. It's really cool because we have this Misty Request supporter that not only lets you search out supporters in her own effect, you're able to get 3. The Lapras also has an ability that can get Misty's back from the discard pile, so it ends up working out like something similar to a Weavile Execute-based deck, where these Misties are reusable turn by turn, and at the same time, they're helping you dig through the deck to get even more supporters into your hand to do big numbers of Ditch and Splash. You'd be surprised at how dangerous this can get, and it is a nice one-hit KO option. There's the hilarious Thrilling Times GX attack as well that does 10, and you flip a coin of heads, you do 100 more damage. Now, if you don't have enough supporters in your hand, or if you just want to hit through something like a Jirachi in the active, this could be an interesting attack on like turn 1. But if you do get 6 additional waters, so 8 total, you get to flip 10 coins instead. I think this will basically never happen because we don't have any good water acceleration anymore, and it's difficult to make something like a Quagnag work these days because we have far less ball search for them. Dragonite is an interesting, like, Lance Prismable target. This is pretty much the best water acceleration we have. It allows you to, once per turn, attach a lightning and water energy from your hand to your Pokemon in any way that you like. So this might end up being in the Slowduck deck just because it's so easy to find Lance when you have Misty's request to dig it out, and then you can just get both this Dragonite and the old fast Call Dragonite into play and sort of cheat them out so that you can maintain attackers and just have more access to supporters, which is pretty cool. Rowlet Eggs is a lot less memey. I think it's a bit more serious, but its biggest drawback is that it is weak to fire. The Super Growth attack allows you to search a deck for a card that evolves from one of your grass Pokemon in play, and then you're able to evolve it like fully up, not only the stage 1, but also immediately into the stage 2. This is where the Serena comes in. It's essentially a Malamar, but for grass energy instead, and it goes to the active, which is far better than going to the bench, because as you know, you don't need to play a bunch of like switch cards anymore, because it does it for you quite nicely. Calming Hurricane does 150 and heals 30, so this sort of tends towards Alolan Eggs probably being like a healing archetype, thanks to things like Gardenia, Life Forest, and all the other stuff we have. Even the Shaman stay in format, so definitely something to bear in mind. Tropical Hour GX is 200 for 3 grass, which isn't too shabby either. And if you have an additional 3 energy, you're able to force the opponent to shuffle all energy in play back into their deck, which is very awkward. But again, I feel like you have to be in a real high roll situation to be able to use Tropical Hour. The good news about Super Growth is that it's so versatile, it can get you into a bunch of other stage 2s. Things like Sceptile to help you win out against Ultra Beast based decks. Things like Victory Bell to give you gussing opportunities. Serena as well, still very helpful just for energy acceleration throughout the game. So there might be a handful of stage 2s going into this deck just because you can Super Growth them into play. And bear in mind, we have Netball for the grass type stuff, so it's quite easy to get things like your early Bounce Weeks and stuff into play, which is pretty cool. Finally, we're going to end on some like non-GX stuff. I think the biggest deal for this slide is that there's so little amount of ball search for these non-GXs. They may end up being in the waiting room until we start getting more support. But that said, Whimsicott allows you to search your deck for any card when you put him down into play, which is pretty nice. I think it might go into things like Whimsicott Porygon Z lists or even Whimsicott Welder base builds, which is pretty reasonable now that the Fairy Charms are so much stronger. So Whimsicott's a bit more of a threat going forward. Breloom has this attack that does 30 and 90 more if your opponent's active is asleep. We're going to try and induce sleep via using things like Mareep alongside U-Turn Board to like move into your Breloom. And we have the new Slumber Forest Stadium card that forces the opponent to flip 2 coins instead of 1 between turns. So you're a 2-hit KO deck with good type coverage that's trying to buy yourself some turns by your opponent napping in between them, which is pretty frustrating sometimes. So definitely something to bear in mind. Right now I'm a bit skeptical that you have enough ball search for it though. Beheeyem also is an interesting card for sure. It can do for a triple acceleration energy 90, and you shuffle him back in and all cards attached into your deck, and you item lock the opponent. Again, maybe trying to use things like Slumber Forest and Mareep as part of your combo to force the opponent to just not be able to attack into you while you try and maintain this trainer lock could be really annoying for the opponent. Aegislash has an amazing ability that allows you to put the Pokemon sort of underneath him back into your hand when he gets knocked out, and the Aegislash himself. So it's essentially a rescue energy attached to him, for those who remember that card. So essentially, once you get into your first Aegislash or Aegislash and Doublade on the bench, you're immediately going to like continually have a chain of attacks with him. Rubble Slash has 10 times the amount of items in your discard pile, so you're going to kit out your deck with a bunch of Acrobikes, Ball Search cards, and basically a bunch of insta-playable items as quickly as possible. There's even the Recycle Energy this card can use, so you even get the energy back when he starts taking knockouts, so you really will just chain him. Once you get him rolling, it's going to be pretty easy. Don't forget as well, we have the Duskstone ability, item, so that you can get into Aegislash much more easily on turn 2. You don't need to rely on rare candies, you can just get into the Doublade and then Duskstone instead, which could be pretty nice. And again, it's extra item cards that you can kit your deck out with to really have a high count, so that your damage is going to be reaching 2-hit KOs. Don't forget as well, we have things like Spell Tag, which can increase this damage output further. Overall, I think it's a little bit weaker than just playing like a basic Malamar-based deck, but definitely something to bear in mind. Jinx might be a nice addition to help out against Spiritomb, so you increase your damage output for building Spite as quickly as possible, so that you aren't waiting around passing for a few turns. Now that we've lost things like Umbreon to retaliate in those early stages, it's definitely something that Spiritomb is missing right now, and Jinx might be the missing link that we need to ramp up Spiritomb as quickly as possible. Zygarde is a nice damage modifying ability that allows you you to do 20 more for each of these on your bench for your Zygarde and Zygarde GXs. So he powers himself up, Boost Fang does 20, and you attach a fighting from your discard pile to one of your bench Pokemon. So it's like a baby Veltol, or more like something like a Raikou from Shining Legends, because Raikou had the Electro powers. In this case, we have Zygardes, which can buff the damage that way. He could end up being like a good early pressure option for the Zygarde GX deck, but even then, it's lacking a bit of energy acceleration. Like, you don't want to sit here doing this the entire game, and even using Cell Connect as a slow turn. So although you can build up into good GX attacks from the Zygarde, I think this may end up still being a little bit too slow. Some of the most interesting stuff is the water stuff that we get on this slide. The Keldeo GX has that really annoying Holy Heart ability, preventing all damage done to it by Pokemon GXs. So this is the new Shining Legends Hooper, essentially, and it may end up sort of building around a quad-style build. The only thing I see awkward for this is that Sonic Hedge only does 110 damage. I feel like you can then sometimes get beaten out by things like a chain of Giratinas, or even things like a bunch of Naganadels in some of these GX-based decks. So you may have to kid it out with a bunch of healing cards in order to stay relevant. But the 110 gets for all effects as well, so that's something reasonable. You're always hitting that 110 no matter what. And it does have the Resolution Sword GX attack, which does 50 for each of your opponent's bench Pokemon. So it's similar to Lycanroc's Dangerous Rogue, but for a slightly higher attack cost. Again, water doesn't have much energy acceleration, so if your opponent does sort of like break through the first Keldeo, you may end up flopping just because you end up like just having to wait 3 turns to do any more damage, just because you have to attach to a bunch of other stuff and just send them other things your way. But outside of things like the Power Plant, there aren't many decks that have enough answers to get through a wall of Keldeos. That's the idea, at least, and it may end up being a thing for Worlds. Tapu Fini is a great answer to Blacephalon. Its second attack, if your opponent has any Ultra Beast in play, you can attack for just a single colorless, so you do 100 for one colorless, and that's obviously going to do ×2 against Blacephalon, so that's a great threat. Something to definitely bear in mind. And Frostlass is a stage 1 that has the Breath of Grudge attack for 1 water. You can put up to 7 counters on Frostlass, and you do 20 times the amount of counters you put on yourself to your opponent. You can try and combine this with Hustle Belt for good damage output, and the whole idea is that you're going to be hitting for weakness on things like Blacephalon or Reshizard to try and one-shot them as well. So if you want to have a Stage 1 tech Pokemon, that could be the answer, but then again, it may be a little bit too clunky, seeing as that we've lost so much Bull Search going forward. But that's it, guys. That's all I have for the speed review. I hope you were able to follow everything, and I hope I discussed everything in good enough length. But that's it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.